the former leader of our computer and technology group. Was that for many years, sometimes sharing the honors with Paul Lewis. He's now, correct me if I'm wrong. My recollection is you had a long career at Hewlett Packard in Waltham, I believe, and we were and well, actually, he's a family friend. His kids are friends with my kids, and it's been a long time. But anyway, he's gotten trapped in New Zealand. The pandemic. He was going to share the places, switch between Plymouth. He left Lexington after many years and moved to Plymouth a few years back, and now and he bought some property in New Zealand, and he hasn't really been able, or it hasn't been appropriate for him to leave. So he's still in New Zealand. So live from New England, it's Al Sherman.
Yeah, nice to see you folks. And I guess I can start the screen share and dive into the program because it can be rather long. Most of the family knows me as Allan, but professionally, I've been Al most of the time, and people at the old computer club called me Al, so I'll reply to either. And as Jonathan said, I lived in Lexington until about 7 years ago, at which time we moved back to Plymouth. And at that point, the group had a very heavy focus on computer programming and programs relating to computers and less on technology. Now the pendulum has swung the other way, but here's some computer stuff. So I'm about 9,400 miles to the southwest of you, and happy to be connected. Anyway, it's always been difficult talking about how to do things with a computer because everybody uses a different computer. They have different software that they prefer, different settings, so it's hard to tailor things for everybody. Let me see if I can move this. Yeah, I guess I can. So anyway, we're going to report on something I've been investigating for a few months relating to file size, particularly the size of a PDF file. I'll describe the details of what the problem was later, but let's start by investigating, discussing a few things about the size of images. And we need some photographs to deal with, to use as an example. So I looked out my window and saw this rose bush and said, oh, okay, I'll go out and take some pictures of our roses. We are not gardeners, but the people who previously had this house were fans of roses, I guess. So there were a lot of roses outside. So I took a few pictures of roses to use. The one on the right happened to have a bee in the middle of it, which made it maybe interesting. But so I've used these, but I made one mistake to start with. And the first mistake is, it's kind of a technical mistake where I said, okay, I'm going to zoom my iPhone image to fill the screen with what I want to see. And when you do that, you end up degrading the picture. The image that your photo sensor in the camera sees is the best information available. If we tell your camera to remap the pixels to a different size, a different size image, you're doing computational changes on the content that can reduce the amount of information. Maybe it's very, very minimal, but uh, we this problem, I believe, is called aliasing. So I wanted to get that to my computer. What's an easy way to do it? An easy way is to send it to myself by email. So on my iPhone, I went to my default email program and said, send this photo, and got this screen. And the screen says that the message would be 855 kilobytes, and I can reduce the size by scaling the image to a different size. The smallest one was about 3.5% the size of the original, or the original was 30 times larger. Which one should I choose? Well, we'll talk about that later. What we'll talk about first is what's the difference. And for the difference, I said, I'll just send the largest one and the smallest one and talk about those. So we did that. When they arrived at my computer, I'm using the web-based version of Gmail, and things look pretty much the same, except the images were physically different in size. But these are the image that I saw on my computer, sized as I received them, for the smaller and the larger. And this is what the size showed up to be. 24 kilobytes is what File Manager reported as the size for the small one, 850 for the large one. But there's already some reduction that went on here, because if I took the original iPhone file and moved it to my computer with a sync cable, it came across as 953 kilobytes. So anyway, we're interested in finding out more about what the differences are between these images. So to do that, I'm using the file properties in Windows 10 from a Windows File Manager, I guess. The point I should have made is that everybody is perhaps operating in a different environment with different capabilities, but you can probably find some utility that's going to do something equivalent to what I demonstrate. So what I did to get file properties is to use to use the fact that when you right click on pretty much anything on a screen on many computer apps, you will get a context sensitive drop down menu that gives you the choices that are relevant to that particular context. So the list that I got is on the right, and at the bottom, I need to, let's see, I should be able to move this. So at the bottom, I clicked on properties to investigate the properties of the file. Now, one of the benefits of putting on one of these shows is that I learn a lot. So beside my first attempt at using the Google Docs slide presentation, I discovered that, gee, I've always overlooked a couple of icons at the top of my screen. There's an icon right at the header bar that will allow me to directly go to properties, or there's a properties icon also on the ribbon. I guess it's the file ribbon of the Windows File Manager. So there are always multiple ways to get to what you want, but what you get to is properties screen. And so we have the large photos property on the left, the small photo property on the right. You can see the difference in sizes. You can see that they were both taken at the same date and time because they are the same photo. It's the same photo was taken and sent uh, two different ways. So you'll notice that two things. There are some tabs at the top that we'll get to, but there's also, this is also a page one of a number of pages. I guess the number of pages depends upon your camera. And if we scroll down, we see that, again, the same date and time, but we get the different dimensions in pixels. These are the pixels that are actually sent in email. They both were sized at 72 dots per inch, which is something that a printer would worry about. And it's kind of arbitrary. What happens is the dots per inch and the number of pixels work together to decide what to determine what the image size will be. So we'll talk a little bit about some of this in bit depth and so forth. What is interesting is in the larger picture, it says the color representation is uncalibrated. On the right-hand side, the color representation is sRGB. Well, RGB is red, green, blue. I don't know what S stands for, but the point is that in reducing the size of the photograph, they've also mucked around with the color resolution. And scrolling down further, both photographs came from the same source. So these are the same on both sides. It just says that the photograph camera was an Apple iPhone 7 Plus with this camera settings, brightness setting. And I had mentioned that I had zoomed to make the picture, part of the picture I was interested in, fill a screen, and I was surprised to see how many decimal places are recorded as the digital zoom value. And this is the details tab of the properties menu. And what I should say is that the information that's here is camera dependent. It can vary considerably. Paul Lewis sent me a photograph, and I was kind of curious about the origin of the photograph. So I right-clicked on the photograph, looked at properties, and by golly, it had the latitude and longitude of where the photo was taken, and I could identify within a few feet of where he was standing when he took that photograph. So there are fewer and fewer secrets in the internet world. So back to the original pictures, and we can see here the picture that we'll look at with the bee in the middle of the flower. If I blow up the pictures so that the bee occupies the same space on my screen, we will see that the large photograph has more detail than the small photograph. And the small photograph just ended up with a bunch of blocks representing different regions. And these are the actual pixels. So when it says the small photograph is 87 pixels wide and 67 pixels high, we could actually count the little squares and verify that that is the case. So that's That answers the question, hopefully, of what is a pixel. So looking further at pixels, here is a picture of another rose. And I zoomed in on a thorn on the stem of the rose, and the thorn is here. And as I zoomed into the maximum amount, we see that the edge is not sharply defined. It's kind of a gradation of pixels, and the pixels are just represented as squares. So the point here is just to clarify what a pixel is for people who are not into that sort of thing. So we're talking about photo size. Some of the things that influence a photo size then is the number of pixels, which we saw comparing these two pixels, and the color resolution of each pixel. So it's a question of each color has a digital value, and how many bits do you provide to define that digital value? It tells you how much gradation you have in the color. How many colors are used on the palette? Well, you can use the full digital representation of your color, or you could perhaps say that there are there's only a subset of the colors that are possible, that are used in this picture, and you only need to have part of them indexed in some sort of a compression algorithm. So that's one of the things that's used by compression. And if you're dealing with a video file, frame rate, of course, directly influences the size of the file. So while we're talking about all of this, I started off by saying that all of the information that's possible is that is seen by the camera sensor, and that is called the raw image. In many cases, you will find the option to save the raw image, and any subsequent processing after that will, by definition, usually degrade the data. So why is file size important? Well, we saw from looking at the B that the quality of the image certainly requires a higher resolution. The size of the file affects your transmission speed, your efficiency, your cost, your storage limitations. Most of us now have lots of available storage on our computers. It didn't used to be the case. But when it comes to cloud drives or Dropbox and so forth, there are limits. When it comes to email, there are limits to how much you can use or how much you have to pay for what you use. And when you're processing an image, the processing time is influenced by the size of the file. So we run into the question that we showed how we can send a file with different resolutions. When you try to send a file, of course, you're constrained by the file size limitation of your email program. And that could vary considerably depending upon what you use for email. So what can you do about it? You can reduce the file size. Certainly, if there are multiple images that you want to send in an email, you can send each one in an individual email. I noticed that with my Gmail, when I tried to send an image that was too large, I didn't expect it would be too large. Gmail said, well, we could buffer part of that image in the cloud and just send a link for the image and let the person at the other end download it from the cloud, and that's not going. Um, there are services that sort of capabilities such as Steve had recommended that you look at Transfer XL, Transfer Now. You can use Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive. There's all kinds of places that you can park things in the cloud, either temporarily or permanently, to be able to download it. So we talked about reducing the size of a photo file. There's quite a variety of photo editing software that you can use. When I look for software, I try to use the lowest common denominator, something that people are likely to already have in their computer, where they don't have to go out and find a particular application. And I found that Paint 3D in Windows was particularly easy to use and flexible for editing software. In fact, I just used it just before this presentation to where I am working on maintaining a website that requires the calendar icons to be a particular size in pixels, and photos have to be resized to be 600 by 400 pixels in that particular case, and that's very easily done with Paint 3D. I don't know if we have time at the end. We can certainly demonstrate things that people might be interested in. I've sent photos to myself to let email reduce the size of a photo. One thing that's really handy is to capture a screenshot of the photo from your screen. And you can use a variety of software to do that. I do that all the time. What to bear in mind is that the number of pixels on the screen simply depend upon your display. And when you copy something from the screen, the image knows absolutely nothing about where the content came from. The display size is whatever it finds on the screen. And in most cases, we don't have the ability to go back, change the camera settings at the source, and take the picture again. So, 1 second. Okay, so we should be back again. I'm not hearing anything from anybody, so I assume you all hear me okay. What is a PDF file? Why do we use it? Well, in 1992, I think Adobe was the company that developed the PDF format called portable document format. And everybody started using Adobe Acrobat Reader as being the standard freebie reader for Adobe Acrobat documents. The advantage of that is that you don't need to have anything special to view whatever it is that you're receiving. The reader software will allow you to see everything in a very close format to the original intention. It builds in the fonts that the original person used, which you don't necessarily need to have. It's pretty universally supported. So I find it very useful. And it's also useful to preserve a particular moment in time if something is changing and you want to record something that happens to be available at a particular point in time that will change. So the first thing we'll look at is printing to a PDF. And I've been doing that more and more frequently. I think a really good example is that, as I mentioned before, I use Gmail. Gmail does a lot of things well, but it does not provide a good way to save an email in outside of the Google environment. You can't download an email to anything that will make a really useful standalone file for them, as far as I know. I guess it depends upon your particular software. So what do people do? Well, one thing you can certainly do is to just hit your print button and print the email. And that is, you may not be aware that one of the things you can do is to hit the print button and print to a PDF file instead of a piece of paper. So we'll talk about that in some of the settings. So here's just an example email. Oh, that's dated. This has changed very, very dramatically by a factor of 100 since I saw this screen. But anyway, if you right-click on your email, you get the context-dependent choices, as I mentioned earlier. The context-dependent choice that I get for email in Windows is this. And the content of your context depends on your environment. In this particular case, the two that are relative would be, that appear to be relative, would be a save as and a print. We can save the email as something and print as something else. Well, I used to use software that would allow me to save as an EML file, which is an email file, which can be read back with an email reader. You can't do that with Gmail, or at least, well, maybe you can if you're using a POP mailbox. But so if I hit the save as email, the choices that I get are HTML based, basically. We can save it as a web page, and I don't consider that to be very helpful. So the usual thing, of course, when you're saving a file is to ask you, where do you want to put it? What do you want to call it? So looking at the other choice, it says save as a PDF. When I hit save as PDF as my oh, I'm sorry. No, the other, what we were coming from here, the choice was save as or print. So when I choose the print choice, this is choices, and we'll get into more details of it later. But at this point, the destination is set as save as a PDF with a preview of how the PDF will look. And then you hit save, you end up with a file. And the file will be exactly the same or very close to the same that you would get as if you actually printed on a printer. So here's a larger document, one of Jonathan's emails, for example. And let's say I don't want to copy the whole thing. Here it was would have been 2 pages. And we can see a scroll bar here that you might not realize that the scroll bar takes half the height of the window. So that says that we're looking at half the window here. We can drag the scroll bar down and see the other half. There's 2 pages here. Suppose I wanted to just take save a record of this particular meeting. I can just open the email and highlight what I want to print and hit print again. And here again, it save as PDF. What I said, okay, so I did save as a PDF. I hit more settings, and at the bottom, I checked the checkbox that said selection only. This is the selection that I highlighted. This is all that would get printed, and in this case, it would all be printed on one page. There is additional customization that's possible. So you can do custom margins. If I click on custom margins, you can actually see the margins and diddle with them. There's a custom scale. So there are other things that may very well be context dependent that determine what gets saved in your PDF or what gets printed on your printer if you choose to do that. So that was in Windows 10. And we'll talk about another app in a Mac a little later, but the Macintosh apparently has a very, very similar capability. And you go to any of a number of places that say print on a Mac, and you get a choice of printers similar to what save at that point. It will again ask the usual, where do you want to put it and what do you want to call it? And I didn't see any other real useful options here. Oh, well, yeah, I guess you do have margins, default, and so forth, but that was the main issues. You can do the same thing then with a Mac and undoubtedly with other software as well. Okay, so we have reached the point now of saying, what's the story? Why am I doing this presentation? And we moved to a condo community in Plymouth, in the Pine Hills. And we have a neighborhood newsletter that's produced by unsophisticated Mac users, 2 people who know how to use the application, but are really not sophisticated at all as computer users. And they put together their newsletter using Google Docs and output it as a PDF file and send a link to that to members of the community. We have access to a community website. Wanted to post the PDF on that website, and the administrator of the website said, it's too big. It's above our limiting size, whatever that was. We can't put it on the website. So we needed a smaller PDF file. Also, it was too big for many email programs to deal with if you wanted to email the actual PDF. So we said, okay, what can we do with it? So I did some exploring in Windows, well, started in Windows 7 and Windows 10. I know very, very little about a Mac. So my Mac knowledge started off being, go to Google and ask the question in Google and you get some suggestions. And I did. And these suggestions did not help the Mac users because they didn't really understand. So, and I have I didn't know of anybody here that that had a Mac. And then I discovered my grandson's girlfriend is a Mac user. So we actually got some screenshots with her help. So, uh, so the newsletter itself is huge, primarily because we need some criteria for what is needed for the PDF. And in this particular instance, the file size trumps quality. We don't really care that much about publication fidelity. The other thing is that sometimes PDF files are searchable, links are clickable, sometimes not. That's something we should notice. Also, whatever solution we come up with for the problem is something that the user should have readily available with whatever software and computer platform they use and within their capabilities. So we will present both within the capabilities and outside the capabilities. So let's go back to the original Google document and say, how did it become a PDF? Well, you go to download in the file menu on a Google Doc, and you have these choices. And you choose the PDF document menu, and the file gets downloaded as a PDF and stored on your local computer. When I did this on my PC, I came out with a 99.4 megabyte file. And when we did it on a Mac, since it's web-based, you're using Google software in the cloud, the size was almost identical, different by a few bits, and came out the same size. And come out with the size reported differently. In one place, it's 101,799 kilobytes, or 99.4 megabytes, or 104,241 something bytes. Why the difference? Well, some of us might know that in the world of selling disk drives, a megabyte is 1,000, a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes, and a megabyte is 1,000 kilobytes. For a software person, it's 1,024. So the numbers are different. So it's a question of, are you looking at this through a software person's eyes or a hardware person's eyes? So, anyway, we talked about printing to a PDF. What if we tried to print this file to a PDF? So we'll go through the same thing again with a little more detail. So I go to the file download, the file print. Okay, I went to the file menu in Google Docs, and at the bottom it says print. When I hit print, I get this drop down with the default destination of the last printer that I used, which is my Brother printer with a black and white print in black and white. So you can just go and change these to what you want. So you would click on the little drop down arrow next to the printer definition and go to the choices that you have beside the hardware printer. And that again is very application dependent, so environment dependent perhaps. So When I do that on my Windows 10 computer, these are the relevant choices. And it just turns out by coincidence that there are more choices, but none of them are relevant. So we have something here called Microsoft Print to PDF and another called Save to PDF and something called a bullzip printer. Well, how would these compare? So if I do a Microsoft Print to PDF, we get various settings, and I expanded it by doing more settings. Saying, oh, turns out that I have page 1 through 13 in the original document, but page 2 is blank and page 13 is blank. I can just select print page 1 and the range of pages 3 through 12 and print them in color, not black and white. Letter size paper. Well, that'll affect the pagination. Pages per sheet. We could actually print it multiple pages on the same sheet. We do all of that and hit print, and you end up with choices. And the choices here are, where do you want to put it? Okay, I'll put it in my download directory. I'll label it with a file name that says it was produced by Microsoft Print by PDF, and save it as a PDF document. There's certainly multiple documents that I can save it as here. What we end up with is 5.25 megabytes instead of 99.4 megabytes. But the file has an image only. It does not contain any searchable text, which is fine if that's suitable for our purposes. We can't search for the text like we could in the original. So that's one possible solution to the problem. If we go, and that was the Microsoft Print to PDF. If we go to save as PDF, set the destination to save as PDF, we have similar choices. The save at PDF in this particular case turned out to be 70.4 megabytes instead of 99.4. And that's really not a very considerable savings. It was searchable and copyable, but not really the droid that we're looking for. And I did not try to analyze the image quality for any of these because they were good enough for this particular use. Okay. What I said was that you can use this print to a PDF or save from a PDF from any place that would use the printer. And what this slide is showing, if I did a Microsoft Print to PDF from Acrobat, I could still do it. Some of the choices would be a little bit different, and you'd end up with the same result. So the bottom line so far is that original file was 99.4. The Microsoft Print to PDF was definitely way smaller than the original. There's something called Mac Quartz Filter that looks even better. What is this Quartz Filter on a Mac? Well, I wanted an easy solution to the PDF size problem. It was, so I went to Google and said, I'm not sure exactly what my search was, but something like reducing PDF file size using Mac. And it had some recommendations, including using a quartz filter. And the quartz filter had its manual pages that looked something like this, or there are various kinds. Turns out that this was not meaningful to the non-computer people who were doing the work. So this is where I went to my grandson's girlfriend's Mac and got some actual screenshots that might help them. So this is what it looks like. You go to, I guess you call it the Finder on a Mac. You find the file, and in the file menu, there's an export. Not export at PDF, that's not helpful, but export. When you click on export, you get a menu that looks like this. And the menu has the usual destination file name, where to put it. It has a number of format choices. We've chosen PDF already, and Quartz Filter, none. Well, if you click for the drop down to select the Quartz Filter, there are a variety of filters that can be applied to the document, and the one that we want is reduce file size. We do that, hit save, and you end up with a file size of 101 megabytes instead of 99, I'm sorry, 1.01 megabytes instead of 99.4. How about the text search functionality? It looks like the Quartz Filter had a problem with converting fonts. The lowercase seemed to be generally okay. Uppercase was not recognized. I don't know if this is what I saw in one of the discussions that said that the preview sometimes displays PDFs improperly, but the advice is carefully check the result to see that it's what you want. And that's how you use the Quartz Filter in a Mac. Okay, so that's something that was simple enough for our inexperienced Mac users. To go to something more esoteric, I have installed in my computer a special driver, a custom print driver. It used to be necessary to do this because Windows did not support some of the functionality that it now does. I was interested in saving a PDF file with a password, for example. And I think you can do that now with built-in Windows software, but you couldn't back then. So I started using this bullzip PDF printer driver, which is one of many competent free drivers that you can install in Windows. And I'm sure there are similar things for other computers as well. So the driver looks to the software like it's a printer, but when you get into the driver, it will allow you to do things that that does not involve the hardware printer. So when I select the print to bullzip, one of the things on the more settings would be quality in dots per inch. And the quality can be all over the place, whether the source supports it or not. So here the default happened to be 600 dots per inch. What we need is a whole lot less. You can choose whatever is appropriate. 72 and 96 used to be standard printer dots per inch settings, but now people can use pretty much a pretty wide selection, I guess. Um, Looking at other driver options is a format option, and we had selected PDFs, but you can save it in different formats using this driver. Under the general document tab, the second tab is a quality choice where you can set it to screen, printer, prepress. And I'm not sure where that will lead, but there are lots and lots of choices, and you just try them and see what you want to use. Looking at the watermark, the merge, and the security tabs, you can add a watermark. You want to have the thing watermarked to say draft. You can do that. You can merge this PDF onto another file. I don't think I've ever tried doing it that way. Or the security tab provides some useful things. So, did I have details of the security tab? Not here, no. The point is that different drivers provide different sets of capabilities, and the effect of the settings on file size was not always as expected. And okay, so well, going back to the download menu, we said you can save it as a Microsoft Word document or an open document format. Open document text is what this refers to, and it's used by a number of things such as OpenOffice. I use LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office, and if you're interested, we can talk about that a little bit. So I downloaded it as an ODT to be used by LibreOffice. And when I tried to open it with LibreOffice, it failed. It's not a perfect world yet. I haven't determined whether it failed because my download was corrupted or whether it was a software problem, but I went back and downloaded it again as a DocX Microsoft Word document, and that one worked. And the Microsoft Word document was not very different from the original PDF document. And I could open it with LibreOffice Writer and export it as a PDF. Okay. Well, right on the file menu header, there's an export directly as PDF, as well as some other choices. And when I did that, it came out to be 1.24 megabytes, which compared to the 99.4 megabytes from Google, it's pretty much the same as using the Quartz filter on a Mac. Doing it this way is expecting a whole lot more from a non-computer savvy user, so it's probably not useful. But the text was readable and searchable. And the point is that the options of saving it as a PDF, when I export it as a PDF, are typical of what you get from other software. It's all different, but you have a lot of control, like the compression quality of your JPEG algorithm, what you want to reduce the image to. I found that the compression quality had almost no influence on file size, but you can have lots of control here. The security settings were interesting. Oh, where's my security settings? Ooh, what happened here? I don't. Oh, wait a minute. Huh, for some reason, okay, for some reason I had lost the graphic here. Security settings here, you have both a password to open the file or to edit the file, as well as an encryption password. So if you wanted to send something confidentially to somebody and send them a password that they had to use to open the file, it's not a very secure password, but it's certainly enough to discourage people from trying to break in. The printing options under security, interesting that you allow changes to be made or not made, to fill in fields in a form or not, to copy content or not. You have a choice here that would allow displaying the PDF on your screen, but not copying it. So the point is that different software has a different set of choices, and you can play around and decide what you want. So what do you need? What's going to be best for you? That's kind of where we're at. Let me stop the screen share and see if there's, I hope people are still here. And if there are questions, you can certainly unmute. We can have a discussion. And where are we in time? Oh, wow, we did this in under an hour. I'm not hearing anything.
Larry, do you know if, Alan rather, do you know if you merge two PDFs, are they truly merged or are they really, is that an optical illusion?
I have been using some freeware called PDF SAM that allows you to basically compose PDFs from individual pages that come from other PDFs.
Right, and do they truly merge or are they really separate files?
Well, what it is every page in a PDF gets put together into one file.
So it is one file.
I presume that that's what happens also when you merge with the driver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what shows up is a single file, which may actually not be the sum of the two parts. It may be a bit smaller.
Well, it could be because the overhead is lower.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would certainly expect that each page is probably separate and standalone.
Now, I was wondering also when it's searchable, is that just an OCR function? Because I use Foxit, and you just do OCR on it, and it becomes searchable.
It certainly is an OCR function, and in some places it's referred to as such. But like if you're in your word processing software, in your Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or something, and save a document and say you want it to be searchable, it's certainly not necessary to use OCR because they have the source right there.
Well, the other thing I was going to say on LibreOffice, if you you can open it as a LibreOffice file, a Word file as a docx, as a LibreOffice file, or as a docx file, I believe, and then it works fine as a docx file. It stays in that format. I think that's
right. Yeah, I would use a little different wording there because I don't really know if that's true or not. But what happens is that LibreOffice can open a docx format. And that's what we did here for this example, and treat it
not as an ODT, not as an ODT.
LibreOffice, and then it gives you the choice of whether you want to save it as a docx or as a
ODT or an ODT. Yeah. I thought what you were doing is trying to open it as an ODT. I thought that was why it failed.
Yeah, that was the first one that failed.
Yeah.
So I just did it as a docx.
Yeah.
But ordinarily it would do either. And I'm just saying that if I take a regular document that was originally loaded into OpenOffice as a docx and say save, don't say anything about how to save it, it comes up with a window that says you will lose some information if you save it as a docx. Do you want to save it as an ODT?
Well, that might be true, but the on LibreOffice, as far as I can see, the only function that's missing is when you have a graphic to remove background, which you can do in Word. Beyond that, I haven't been able to find any functional difference.
Yeah, I'm sure there are functional differences, but certainly
They're hard to find.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. And
One function you won't find, Jerry, is the need to pay for it.
Ah,
but,
And there-
yeah.
you mean you don't? What you're really saying is you don't need to pirate a copy.
That's okay.
Right.
That's the function.
Let me just address that, okay? One of the reasons why I use LibreOffice is because I am offended by the strong arm tactics that Microsoft uses to force you to use their product. And I have a lot of different computers that I use it in and just don't want to go through the hassle of going through a Microsoft account and all of that. So maybe out of protest, I use LibreOffice, but instead of sending money to Microsoft, I think in this particular case, I send a charitable donation to an outfit called Software in the Public Interest that sends it to LibreOffice to pay for the expenses of LibreOffice development. And occasionally I do the same thing for Wikimedia that does the Wikipedia software, or for the Internet Archive. There are a number of public funded causes that you can actually donate to as a charity.
One function I forgot was that Dragon Systems loses much of its functionality on LibreOffice because it doesn't use the same formatting.
I'd like to talk about something that you were mentioning a few minutes ago, and that is the ability to merge PDFs.
Yeah.
I had a need to do that for my wife. She had two documents. They were both PDF, and she needed to pull pages from one and put them into the other. And we tried to find a solution for her on the Windows machine, and it was very difficult to do. And then I found that if I ran a program called Preview, which is intrinsic on a Mac, could have two previews going, and it shows each of the pages, and then I can drag and drop pages from one document to the other and rearrange them and then save it. It was like, it's not like I have to find an application to do this.
Well,
No.
my Foxit software does that too.
Okay.
There are apparently any number of applications that do that, including the paid version of Adobe Acrobat.
Yeah, I wanted to avoid the paid version.
Likewise.
Bob, you wanted to say something?
No, it was basically the PDF SAM that Alan mentioned. I don't know if it has side-by-side panes where you can compare directly, but yes, you can lift pages and move them around and all that. But I don't think it's as simple as drag and drop. And what was the name of the software you used, Steve, on the Mac?
When you bring up a document of any sort, a file of any sort, you can preview it. You right-click and choose preview. Pretty much every one. And when I preview a PDF and then I find another preview, another PDF, and I preview it, I have two windows that show those files that I can copy between them.
Oh, so it can be drag and drop.
Yes.
Okay, what's happening here?
Yeah, there are a number of websites that offer free PDF editing and reordering features. You have to be willing to upload your document to their website to do it, but they are a few choices out there that do that.
In our case, that wasn't possible because this was confidential information. We did not want to upload up anyplace.
The one nice thing about those types of sites is they work on anything with a browser only, so you can even use them with a Chromebook.
Mhm. Yeah. One thing I wanted to point out that actually I think I skipped over the slide in navigating through my slideshow. So I'll just momentarily share the screen again. Oh, wait a minute. This is, yeah, this is the screen I want to share. So when I was talking about that newsletter, this was just a few sample pages from the newsletter that I had put up to give you an idea of what the photographs were like in the newsletter. And the photographs, for the most part, came from smartphones, so they had lots of bits in the original. And what was kind of interesting here was I said, okay, yeah, this is a good shot to show you, but hey, can people read what's here? And some of the people who post things on the internal newsletter might be sensitive to that. So I actually went to the trouble to reduce the pixel
Let's see if I can do this
resolution
now.
of, so you can read it. So
Are you talking to us, Drew?
Oh, sorry. I'll mute.
yeah. No.
Mhm.
So anyhow, I found that this Windows 3D editor
In
worked
3D.
worked very well for that.
Yeah.
So do we have any other questions or topics?
Sounds like we're all set, Alan.
Well, very good. Oh, hi, David.
Good to see you.
It's getting a little late over here. Maybe some people are.
They don't
starting to
look
wind
they
down.
don't
What
look
was that?
asleep.
Yeah.
And there are some extra features that are available in PDFs that if you save it natively in your word processor, for example, a table of contents that's clickable. For example, you get directly in the word processor when you do the export. But if you went through a driver, you probably would lose that functionality.
Yep. True. There are a lot of things that can be done. You just have to find the appropriate tool and learn how to use it. And one of the things on my plate was there a couple of tools that I wanted to learn to use for this presentation that I just didn't get to do because it takes so much time to become proficient in something new.
Al, I have
Yeah.
a quick question while you're here on because you're the most senior member, I think, the one that's been the longest member. Do you know how far back our club goes when it started?
Ooh.
Were you the one who started it, Alan?
I had
No.
some notes of that, and I met with the guy that had started the club, and he started it back in the early days of PCs when people didn't know how to use a PC. And it started off with doing a lot of hand-holding and having training sessions on how to use a PC.
Do you know who that was?
I've forgotten his name. I have it somewhere.
I
Yeah.
think he's passed away.
Yes, he has. Yeah.
We were in the basement of the school, the Lexington High School, the old original
old
Lexington
high
High School.
Right, right, yeah. So then I guess when he left, Paul Lewis took over, and I watched. I participated for a few years, and then Paul. And then I ended up doing more, and Paul doing less. So
Cindy, I think I'm the oldest.
Oh, okay. Well, if either of you run across any information, send it along, because I'd like to keep the record as far back as we can go. Okay.
That's nice.
yeah.
Have you
Probably
tried
not-
Ancestry?
No, but
How
now
far
there's
back
a
do we want
thought.
to go?
How do we send in our DNA? I don't.
Yeah,
All right,
we-
I got a question for Alan. Okay. As I understand it, Alan, you used to live in United States, probably even in Massachusetts, maybe even in Lexington. Now you don't. You live in New Zealand, that place.
Oh,
It's interesting to see that the blood isn't rushing to your head, but I'd be curious to know what differences you see, other than the fact that we're getting ready to get into spring and you're getting ready to get into winter.
Oh.
But other than that, what differences do you see down there from here?
Big differences. I am standing on my head, but the software inverts the picture so you don't notice. Well, first of all, I still legally live and vote and pay taxes in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And about, 14 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that, our younger son emigrated to New Zealand. So we started visiting New Zealand. And I used to not be really interested in being a snowbird and kind of poo-poo the people who flew south for the winter. And then we started flying south, but much further south than most. So we ended up getting a vacation home here, summer home here, let's call it. And coming to New Zealand for 4 months of the year. So in March of 2020, we were about to come back to Massachusetts, and COVID occurred. And our first choice was, well, do we stay here or do we go back? And after we had made the decision to say, well, let's stay here, we were notified by Air New Zealand that our flight had been canceled anyway. So we consider ourselves to be prisoners in paradise. We certainly aspire to come back when it's safer to do so. And one of the constraints is, well, until recently, it was very difficult to leave New Zealand and get back in without jumping through the appropriate hoops of 14 days in government supervised isolation and that sort of thing. And that is all changing now as we speak. What happened? Ooh, I wonder if I still have that on my screen. In any event, what happened was, New Zealand being an island nation, we were able to clamp down on people bringing COVID into the country and keep it out for about 18 months, where we were, the only cases in the country were a few cases that were brought in by travelers. They were nearly all caught in government supervised isolation, and they did a good job of contact tracing, of following up on any COVID that got out of the country and got out of the isolation hotels, and we were able to keep it out until just a few weeks ago. And with the Omicron
Frozen.
what happened is the New Zealand government embarked rather lately, in a late fashion, in getting the immunity level up with vaccinations in the country. And we're up in well, I think it's 96% now that have had 2 or more rounds of vaccine. We still have a large number of people who are anti-vaxxers, but we still well into the 90s people who are vaccinated, we're certainly finding that what the vaccine is doing is keeping COVID out of the hospital for those that are vaccinated. It's not preventing the spread of COVID. So what's happening is that 3 weeks ago, we had gone from almost 0 to 50 cases a day, then 200 a day. It was doubling daily. And now it's up to about 25,000 new cases per day in the country. The population of New Zealand is about the same, is not that much smaller than Massachusetts. We're 5 million people, you're 7 million people. We currently are getting about 25,000 new cases per day that we expect to hit a peak in a couple of weeks and then hopefully level off and start going down. In fact, the rate of increase has been diminished for the last 3 or 4 days. So hopefully we will not continue to double every day. So what has happened here is that for almost the last couple of years, we have not had to wear a mask. We have what they have asked is that we keep track of where we are. I have my mask handy just in case. But now they want everybody to wear a mask, to socially distance. They've limited the number of people that can gather in one place to 100 at a time. But that's pretty much about to go by the wayside as a result of how widespread Omicron has been.
So why did it take off? What was the change in methodology that it took off on you?
There was a difference in the level of contagion between Omicron.
Oh, it was just from the Omicron itself.
And Delta.
So you're catching up with us now.
And, pardon me?
So you're catching up with us
Unfortunately, yeah, we are catching up with you.
and surpassing us.
What happened was that we had Delta and then we had Omicron, and it peaked up very much. And over the past, I don't know, several weeks, it has been dropping precipitously, the number of people, the number of cases and so forth. And now they're opening up. So you're saying that the things were open there and now you're getting hit with Omicron. Is that what it is?
We expect that to happen here as well. What happened is that a lot of the so-called wisdom that we learned in the beginning does not apply to Omicron. It used to be it affected older people and not younger people. And the younger people said, oh, we don't need to be vaccinated. We don't have to worry about it. We're young, we can fight it off. So the university year is just beginning, and the students are coming back, and they were saying, oh, well, let's have our parties. Let's get it over with. Let's catch Omicron now. And they've gone from essentially zero to being the centers of contagion. We just had a huge public rally in front of the Parliament building in Wellington that has finally been chased away by the police yesterday, primarily yesterday, where people were camped out and it was just a terror show there. So there are vociferous, there are people who in opposition here as well, but a small number, very loud. We'll
Alan, did
see
you
what
say
happens
2,000
now.
or
The fact that,
20,000 a day?
oh, it's 25,000 a day or something like that now.
Because yesterday we were under 1,000 in Massachusetts.
Yep. What was the maximum?
So it was around 25,000.
Yeah. So we're probably about there, but we're coming from a base of close to zero. So
Well, but Omicron's runs so fast. It's a double-edged sword. It runs very fast and it finds its targets, but it runs so fast it runs out of targets.
yep, exactly.
And we're down to a 7-day positivity rate, if I believe the numbers of 1.7.
Alan, I
Yep.
don't know if you're following it down there, but we follow in Boston. We follow the viral copies in the sewage.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
that's
They
known
do
as a
that
pooled
here.
sample if there ever was one. But
They
the
do that here too.
are you doing that too? And they publish it, and and that's sort of a leading indicator of, and you don't get into all these issues of who tested at home and they didn't report it and all this stuff that just goes by the wayside. And so you
Well,
have a very good sense of where you're headed from the wastewater viral copies. And it's amazing how many viral copies there were. At the peak, there were like 15,000 copies per milliliter.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yep. Here's the testing story here. We have been doing a great deal of testing, encouraging anybody who has any likelihood of being ill to go get tested for the last more than a year, and doing thousands of tests a day. And when it actually, my grandson just graduated with a bachelor's in chemistry from the University of Auckland, and came back to our town here and was looking for a temporary job and was hired a week ago to do throat swabbing at a new drive-in testing facility, and worked for a few days doing that. And because of the large amount of Omicron here, the laboratories have become completely swamped and overwhelmed, and they have gone to giving everybody a rapid access antigen test. Go home, take the test, and report what you find. So it's not clear what's going to happen there. But what happened was that the positivity rate here was low enough so that they could pool 10 tests together, test all 10 in the lab. If they found anything in the 10, they would retest the 10 individually. Now the positivity rate,
The positivity rate.
the contagion rate anyhow is the highest in the world. It was about 3.4. And
pool testing doesn't help.
The positivity rate is so high that the labs are not able to do that, and the labs were swamped. So what happens now is, if they suspect that somebody might have a different variant They will still swab them. They have done a huge amount of genome testing to identify where the different strains have come from, where the contagion has come from, but the numbers have become so great that they're not able to do so. So what happens as of now, we can still go to a restaurant and be served in a restaurant if we can show our vaccination certificate.
People tend to eat outside.
And you can eat outside as well. And they have often takeaway for people who want to order over the phone and just get a takeaway bag. But things are becoming well, at this point, it's unclear just what's going to happen, but the direction that we're going is the realization that half the country is going to get it, and it is not going to be that productive to try to do contact tracing or to be able to do a complete job of suppressing things.
Might you want to come back to Massachusetts because we're better off than you are there from a COVID standpoint?
At this point, we still have a credit with Air New Zealand for the money that we paid to come back to Massachusetts, and we're looking to see when that might be, and hopefully it'll be this summer. We'll see. Wait a few weeks and see what happens. But in the meantime, living here has been just delightful. Of course, we have to put up with things like socialized medicine here, which has worked out very well. We're getting good medical care. There are kind of the same kind of problems here that you have in Canada, though. We are beginning to experience cost of importing the things that get imported here. The worldwide shortage of shipping capability, shipping containers, ship availability has caused the price of importing things to go up tremendously. But we're certainly in a good spot for most from most aspects.
Do sheep get COVID? You see, some animals do, some animals don't, because the ACE receptors are different. So that, for example, horses don't get it, and cats do get it, and our deer population gets it. But it has only gone from humans to deer. It has not gone from deer to humans. They're probably too skittish.
Well, we do some commercial raising of venison here. And
they may get it. I don't know. Cats are, dogs don't get it much. Cats are especially vulnerable.
Well, the
big cats,
issue,
small cats.
Yeah,
because of the ACE receptor.
There was not very much opportunity to get it here, but that has changed now with Omicron. So we'll have to see.
It looks from the online sources that the sheep are less vulnerable than the cats and others.
Well, that's a relief.
So what we've got to do is get rid of the deer.
There you go.
There used to be a lot of sheep raised here. A lot of it has been supplanted by cattle.
Cattle are also said not to be susceptible.
Cattle, yeah, both sheep.
Well, why don't we thank Allan
for
participating once again in our club. I'm a newer member. I've only been in the club a couple of years now, 3 years maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Allan. It was very nice.
Very, very nice to be able to do so, and nice to see some of your faces, and certainly nice to continue to participate in the emails that come all the time, along with the other 200 emails per day that I have to wait. One question I have is, what's the state of my Prius going to be? The traction battery is undoubtedly dead as a doornail.